Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Leonard. I'm Chairman of the Board of Appeals. And Bev, we do want to call the case that's before us here.
Sure, 58 Century Lane,
Okay. And this is a matter that was
and Jake is here, along
Good.
with Marion. Yep.
it was heard a couple of weeks ago, and we continued it to this evening. And I understand that we need to continue the case for another 1 week. Is that true?
That's
Yeah.
exactly true. Yes.
Okay. So that would be the 20th
Correct. At 7:30.
at 7:30.
Yes.
So Marion, nice to see you, and nice to see the applicant. And you want to give us a brief report as to how things are progressing?
Do you want me to report or Jake?
Marion, yeah, well, you're getting paid for
Yeah,
this.
So the Delmores have provided a sketch plan right now showing the species of trees and trees and other plantings that they intend to put in their backyard, especially along the screening area and back of the deck. I think they gave that to me this weekend, and I did send it over to the neighbors that I represent, and they are reviewing the plan. And if they're satisfied with those planting species, then I think the Delmores will go back. They have to go back and get a signed plan and something that says, the plants will be maintained for a certain period of time or replaced. The standard kind of thing that you put in that sort of requirement. So that's the status of things. Depending on how things go, I'm very hopeful that one way or another, the issue will be resolved this week, and I appreciate the continuance.
Now, are the plantings arborvitae or some different species?
They're arborvitae and I think red maple, is that right?
Yep.
And they're more arborvitae than red maple, but they're interspersed. So, and they will be planted at between 8 and 10. I don't have the plan in front of me, but I think it was between 8 and 10 feet. So they will be tall when they're planted, and they grow quite tall after that. So that information would be included in the final plan, what the potential height is and what the planting height is.
Okay, that sounds great. I guess my only question is 1 week sufficient for you?
Well, what do you think, Jake, about getting a final plan prepared? Once you go back to your landscaper, do you know what time he needs in order to, it has to be a signed plan. It has to show, as currently, I think it does, it has to show that each species of plant, and it needs to show the planting height and the potential growth, which is just standard information that he will have, or whoever it is.
Right. I think we could do it in a week, but I mean, if it's more reasonable to give us a little bit more buffer, instead of coming back in a week and having another continuation, I mean, is it possible to do it 2 weeks? And I mean, I don't know. I could probably get it done, but
Problem is you don't have it back yet. So I don't know whether there's going to be any back and forth on the plantings. So you need to know that before you can send it back to your landscaper. On the other hand, the Board of Appeals has an awfully tight schedule. So what do you think?
We do have the 27th open. That's it. Yeah, the 27th of September.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my suggestion is that we do that because it seems to me that we can get this done, but we have the issues of dealing with third parties, and the only thing that concerns me is if we go over to let's say it's September 27th. I think that's the date Bev mentioned, and we get the application resolved, then what we're going to need is a very quick decision from the board. It's got to be filed. And then you've got this, basically, it's 20-day appeal period. If we give you the relief that you need. So there's another 20 days tacked onto that. And then once there's no appeal, then you have the relief that you're asking for. And then we're probably in the second or third week of October. And my question, that's a wind up to ask this question. Can you plant arborvitaes at the end of October or perhaps early November? Let's assume the landscaper is busy. Is that a reasonable and realistic thing to do?
I think the later, as far as I understand, the later in the season, the fall season is not as ideal as the early to mid part of the season. So again, I don't know the availability of the landscaper to have the plantings in this
Yeah.
season, I guess.
Let me ask you this question. If you got the variance, when would you plan to do the construction project? Would it be in the spring, or would it be this fall or early winter?
We initially had hoped for it being this fall, but I don't know the availability of my builder at this point, who's going to file for the permits to actually put in a deck, because this process kind of put everything on hold for a bit. You know what I mean? So, and as far as I understand, you could build a deck, but once it starts getting into the winter time, you can't really be digging holes in solid ground. So
yeah, I'm not sure of that. But so if you were going to do that, I think, Mary, you help me here if I'm stepping on my own feet. We continue it for a couple of weeks. We find that we can't put the arborvitaes in, or it's not appropriate to put them in. It's not good practice, whatever you want to call it. But the applicant wants to go forward and at least start the improvement project. And so they want to build the deck. Realistically, you're not going to get, it's fine to build the deck, but you're not going to get a lot of use out of the deck until the spring. So it's unlikely that the deck is going to be used. That would be annoying or interfering with Marion's clients' peaceable enjoyment of their residence. Does it make sense? Well, if we continue at 2 weeks, those issues we should be able to flesh those issues out within that 2-week period. And if Marion and the applicant are able to talk to each other, and I hope you are, it seems like you're able to do that, and we should be able to know when we get to the 27th where we stand on this, and everyone will be on I guess a knowledgeable basis as to what's going to happen and how it's going to work itself out. I know that's a lot of gibberish, but I think you know what I mean. Because I understand that not a lot of plantings are done in the late fall, but I'm not sure October's a late fall. I'm not familiar with landscaping.
Yeah, it's changing. But you can't guarantee that it's going to be warm. It's been warm later, but I know working with other landscapers, the season goes a little longer, but that's no guarantee. Yeah, I'm kind of torn, but I do think it's a pretty short amount of time to turn around the final plan, make sure we've got everybody in agreement, have your landscaper produce what we need in a signed copy that everybody has agreed to by next Monday.
No,
So
I think that's
maybe
true.
it makes more sense to go to the 27th, and then we can still make every effort if there's anything I can do. And if there's agreement to get, you get the decision in, wait the 20 days and then get going. But you don't even know if your contractor can do that right now. So, and if you did have to delay the whole thing till spring, you'd be all lined up and ready to go. you could do your plantings or however you plan to do it. You could do the construction the way you would ordinarily expect to. So, I mean, I think one way or another, it should be worked out okay, providing we get everybody to agree. So a little more time, I think, is going to help. I think that would
I
be
do too.
very good.
I do too. Even if it really involves moving into the spring, which probably nobody wants, but one of the consequences here is we have to face reality. I don't know what the weather's going to be in late October. My memory from the first hearing is that the plantings here are somewhat extensive. They may be very expensive,
Mhm.
relatively speaking. The house is probably worth a fortune, but still coming up with the money for all of these plantings. And I don't know, and Marion may know if you represent landscapers, putting these types of arborvitae and other trees or bushes into the ground, let's say in the end of October, whether the landscape company is going to take the position that's at your risk, or will warrant the trees in the plantings, because it would be terrible if you spent $6,000 or $7,000 on plantings and had them die in early November due to some crazy cold spell or something. And lo and behold, you have to replicate them again in the spring. So I think you should be discussing that with your landscaper and his availability, and whether they can do the work within that time frame, whether the plantings are warranted during being put into the ground in late October, let's call it, so that everyone's protected. And then it's up to you and Marion to discuss it. If you want to put it over to the spring, that's your call. On the other hand, I do appreciate people like to get things done. And if you want to take a shot at doing it sometime in November, that's your call. I don't want to put you in that position if you don't want to be there.
Sure.
So I think you know what the issues are to discuss.
Mhm. Yes.
And so I'm sure you'll come up with a sensible solution, and I'll try to come up with an entry in my diary to be available in 2 weeks, so we can get this thing heard. So with that being said, by agreement of the parties, we're going to continue this particular hearing for 2 weeks. And is that right, Mary, until the 28th?
27th.
To the 27th. Mhm.
Great. And is that at 7:30 or 7 o'clock?
It will be at 7:30,
Okay, 27th, 7:30. I'm going to put that in my diary right now. So
unless you want 7 o'clock. We could do 5:30. I don't care. Whatever.
you call it. What would you prefer, 7:30 or 7?
We got to wrap it up. I got a 7 o'clock here. It doesn't matter. You took 7. Sure. Let's do 7.
Do you want to do
Okay.
7, Marion? Is that okay?
Yes, it's okay. Is that
Okay,
good for you?
that's fine. Let's do
That-
7 o'clock on the 27th, and thank you all for.
Is the applicant okay with, Jake, are you okay with 7?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, that's great. And thank you for, I apologize for the delay, and thank you for your patience, and keep talking, and we'll be in a sense, we'll be able to make sense of this and make an intelligent decision which way to go, okay?
Okay, thank you.
That everyone said, okay, we're adjourned for the evening. Thank you very, very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good evening. Good evening, folks. So today is December 13, 2021. It's 7:07. My name is Jeff Mullen. I'm the acting chair of the Board of Appeals, chairing the hearing for the comprehensive permit for 582 Blue Hill Avenue. With me are Giselle Joffer and Frank O'Brien, who are members of the board. I apologize to everybody for my tardiness. Tonight is a continuation of the public hearing that we've been holding for several months. Let me acknowledge at the top that we thank Mr. Schomer and the Tamposi team for their most recent submittal of several pieces of homework. I believe tonight we were going to hear testimony from the applicant on that submittal and on some homework that the board had provided, several questions. So unless there are questions from the members of the board or other agenda items, I'll just ask Mr. Schomer to provide us with a status report. Members? Okay, Mr. Schomer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening to you and to the members and to the members of the public. Hope everyone had a nice end of the summer. We're back here and ready to get going again. As you mentioned, Mr. Chair, we did submit about a week ago an updated plan set, which included updated engineering materials, architectural drawings, and landscaping drawings for the revised layout that we've been discussing the last couple of meetings. As outlined in my letter of September 7, the updated plan submission includes additional details for the landscaping of the new courtyard area in front of the new shortened north building. It includes roof design details for the west building. It includes updated context perspective renderings from Blue Hill Avenue, from Meeting House Lane, and from Robbins Street, which show the new massing details of the proposed buildings. The plan set also includes an updated shadow study, as was requested by the members, and an updated photometric light impact study. And our team members are here tonight to discuss each of those. We have Dan Riggs with us, Jim Burke from DeSalle Burke-Sala, and Blair Hines from Verdant Landscape Design. In addition to the updated plans, we did file a report that was conducted by EST Associates, which is an independent environmental monitoring company. And they conducted a 2-week sewer flow study in the Meeting House Lane sewer line. And Jim Burke is available tonight to answer questions about that. It's a very technical report, and so it'll be helpful to get his views and to go through what exactly that study means. Additionally, I can report to the members that we have submitted updated auto turn drawings, which show the access through the site for the Milton Fire Department's largest ladder truck, ambulance, and single-use box truck. Our traffic engineer, Bob Michaud from MDM Transportation, is available tonight to answer any questions about that. And I can report to the members that we did meet with Chief Madden of the Milton Fire Department back on August 27th to go through this study. And Jim, I'm sorry, Bob Michaud can explain that further. In summary, Chief Madden seemed satisfied with the site access. We showed him some new drawings that show that the entry circle actually does allow for the Milton Fire Department's ladder truck to access the entirety of the circle, although that's not the optimal suggested turning movement that is designed for the site. It is possible for them to do that, and so he was satisfied with the options that his team of firefighters would have in accessing all areas of the site. So without further ado, members, I would turn it over then, if it please the board, to Dan Riggs of Embark to go over the architecture. And then from there, if it please the members, we could proceed to go into the technical engineering and the flow study with Jim Burke.
Yeah, can I ask Mr. Schomer, do we have the flow study, and has that been provided to Mr. Reardon?
Yes, it has, Mr. Chair. It was provided to Mr. Reardon the same day that I filed it with the board.
And Ms. Barrett, can I ask if the peer reviewers are on deck tonight to hear this?
They're actually not on this evening, Mr. Chair. They are aware of the submittals. I think they're planning to be on for the next hearing. I wasn't
Okay.
sure if we needed them tonight, so I gave them a night off.
So the next hearing, just to take care of a little housekeeping, the next hearing is on the 22nd. At that point, I think it would be helpful to hear from the peer reviewers on the water and drainage and on the site design for any final comments on the final submittal, as well as to just confirm with the town on the fire department issues regarding what we're about to hear from the applicant. And make a note to Mr. Zawinski, if you could just make sure that this information gets to the appropriate people in the Milton Fire Department. In the next hearing, we can pay attention to the peer review reply, as well as any other comments that we're hearing from this more comprehensive submittal from the applicant. Does that sound right, Ms. Barrett?
Yes, Mr. Chair, it's fine.
All right, thanks. Mr. Schomer, please, questions from the members? Mr. Schomer, please proceed.
Thank you. I'll turn it over now to Dan Riggs of Embark Architecture to go over the new materials that we'd submitted. I see him on here. Perhaps he's having technical issues.
Dan,
Oh,
you're
there he
muted.
is.
Oh, sorry about that. I was on mute. Thanks, Jesse, and thank you to the Mr. Chairman and the members of the board for your time tonight. I'll run through the changes to the architectural drawings, which Jesse well summarized, include the updated MEP roof layouts, as well as updated views and updated massing and building design. We've essentially revised our entire set from the previous submission in order to be comprehensive about the changes that we've made. So starting with the architecture, we're now at an 84 unit project. So just to quickly kind of go through the project statistics, our building is 84 units. It's slightly shrunk from the previous submission. So our total building square footage is 133,000 square feet, 133,665 square feet. We feature 84 units, and of that, there are 34 one-bedroom units, 41 two-bedroom units, and 9 three-bedroom units for the 10% of our ratio. To jump into the site design, this really represents a continuance of the last presentation that we showed you on August 11th. So again, just to reorient everyone, the west building is here. That's now a 5-story building above grade. The north building is here. That's now it continues to be a 4-story building above grade. The existing house and the existing gardens are here. And as we'll show you in the landscape presentation in a little bit, this kind of recovered area just northwest of the north building has been reincorporated into the site as an additional landscape area in the plan. So this sheet just shows the distances from abutters, and you'll see again in the later slide. There's been about 50 feet has been taken off of this north building over the course of the last revision, which increases its distance from Delphi to 130 feet from the corner of that building. And we also have a number of distances. These have remained pretty constant from the last presentation from the rear of the site. We're still looking at a 2-way drive as you enter the site, which leads to a loading zone here, helping to control the traffic within the site. 7 parking spaces for visitors at the top, and our turnabout that centers itself on the existing historic building. And that continues with a 1-way drive around the site, exiting on the southern end of the site on Blue Hill Avenue. This is an axonometric looking in the southerly direction. So again, you can see this area here that's been reincorporated into the site as a landscape area. And you can see here, we've modeled all of the MEP equipment on the top of the roof, now all the condensing units and rooftop thermal units, as well as elevator overruns. So you'll see those in all of the views that we depict. So we're trying to represent those as accurately as possible. So representing all the condensing units that we'll need for the project there. And we'll show you our solution for how we've kind of incorporated that within the roof design in a way that we think minimizes its impact on both the site and sound of those units for the abutting units. This is another axon view looking north on the site. And again, this is the existing historic garden. Here, the west building at 5 stories and the north building at 4 stories with this revised massing. These are 2 site sections drawn through the site. So this is looking east to west. So up here is Blue Hill Avenue, going down to Meeting House Lane, and this is cut through the west building, as well as through the historic garden, and that's a view of the north building beyond that. This is a site section that goes north to south. It's cut through the existing historic building. And we'll show you plans of how we're planning on programming that. It hasn't veered since the last time we presented that information, but we'll show it again today. As well as the area that where Delphi Academy is, that's beyond the trees in this view. And the west building in the distance beyond the historic garden walls. So we'll start with a couple context views. This is our view from Meeting House Lane, and in the foreground, we've ghosted the existing trees that are off property or on the abutting parcels to the south of our site, the southeast of our site. So from Meeting House Lane, which is where this view is taken from, you can see the lower section of the north building here, presenting a 3-story building height at that point, as well as the west building in the distance here. And to give kind of a clearer illustration of that context, we have an existing photograph from this angle here at the top left, just to give you an idea of the size and character of the existing foliage that is there right now. The second view is taken from Robin Street, so that's marked here by this red arrow is approximately where that view is taken from. So this looks over Delphi Academy as well as the existing stream here. And again, this view at the top left is a context view taken from that perspective to give you an idea of the extent of the foliage, the size of the foliage that exists there now. And again, here you can see the 50-foot mass that's been removed from the building is marked by this red dashed line that you can see here. So making a considerable chunk out of that building and really shortening the length of the north building as it's visible from Robin Street. This third context perspective is taken from Blue Hill Avenue. So this is driving sort of north along the site. Again, this view to the left, upper left here is the existing context as we had photographed it. And we did our best to kind of mimic a lot of the foliage that exists from that view now, and ghosting any of the trees here that would directly block the building. So we'll go into the facade strategy a bit more later. But here you can see this part of the west building where the topography continues to rise as you go west along the site into the Vos Hill neighborhood and that part of the context. So the height here is sort of diminished by that nature of the topography on site. These are the building plans, so going through them. The garage level plan has changed very slightly since the last plan iteration that we presented to you. So we've with the 2 units that were removed from the project, we've also removed 3 parking spaces, and those were taken out of this garage level. So really removing them from the corner here. Whoops, sorry about that. So removing them from the corner here where they directly abut the Delphi property, if you can see my cursor, has helped to relieve some of the kind of constraints on the site layout at that point, and really not affected the garage layout beyond that. So we're still showing the same amount of bicycle parking and same trash removal systems as we presented previously. This is the first floor plan. So here we're showing west building layout here, the north building layout here. And as we had presented previously, this kind of site entries remain consistent with that. So the existing entry to the historic house has been preserved, but becomes a much more secondary entry to the site. The main entry would be brought through here between the existing house and the north building. It allows us to make that an accessible entry, as well as to expand that entry and allow for deliveries, loading package et cetera, to happen at that point, as well as to create a shared grade between, or shared floor level between the existing structure and our first floor of the north building. And beyond that, we're still showing the same basic layout of the site with the addition of this new landscaped area at the page north here. And this is our next floor up. So essentially all those units stack. And we're using the existing building, which I'll show you in more detail with some slides that we had previously presented, but we're using that as lobby, amenity, and management space within that part of the building. And as you can see here, this 52-foot section is roughly showing the extent of the previous north building extents. They had gone all the way to where this edge of the parking deck below is here. So we still have some retaining walls here to help accompany that parking garage, but that's been incorporated within all of our landscape planting designs. The third floor, this is where we start to step back at the rear. So we have a very generous setback here of about 33 feet, which allows for some small unit patios for those units, but really helps to break up that view from Meeting House Lane and present that 3-story section of the building to those neighbors in the rear. At this point, the existing building, what little attic space there is could be used as storage, but would really be non-accessible to the public as it is today. And again, the units stack as they go up on the west building. The 4th floor plan is essentially the same as the 3rd floor plan. Within the north building, this is all now within that mansard roof structure. And the 5th floor plan shows how really we've pushed back all the edges on this west building here to try to mitigate the view of that or the mass of that floor on the west building here. So each of those pieces is pushed back about between 6 and 8 feet. So we've gone from a 70-foot wide building to about a 54-foot 6 building that's taken at the widest extent of the building there. Again, to help minimize the impact visually of that part of the building, that new addition to the building from the neighboring homes. And this is the roof plan. So again, in all of the context views, these roof units have been modeled. But what we've done is raise the parapet edges of the roof about 1.9 feet up above the roof structure. And you'll see that in a section in a couple slides. What that helps to do is just to reduce that visual perspective, the ability to see those condensing units and those RTUs from the surrounding neighborhood. And this is just to rehash some of the programming from the existing house interior. So again, these are existing photos of the main spaces within the existing home that we're intending to preserve in kind to the greatest extent that we can as we start that work. So again, that first floor of the existing house becomes a lounge area, potentially a game room here, leasing and management space, restrooms where there are restrooms existing. And then in this connection piece over to the north building are where the main entry would happen, as well as the mail package, kind of concierge type functions and that aspect of the program. On the second floor, we have a little bit more of the kind of quieter functions of the amenity spaces. So we were showing sort of a fitness suite back here with storage, yoga and fitness room, a fitness room here, as well as a conference room, co-working media room, sort of the new version of a library type space within a multifamily building. So then to move on to the elevations. So we made very minor changes to the scheme that we had previously, and I'll show you more materials of what we're planning in a moment. But what we're hoping to achieve with the elevations themselves is to contrast the existing house. So we've made deliberate decisions about what types of materials we use, what type of a brick we use, so that it's not mimicking the existing house too closely. We want it to contrast the existing house and be very neutral materials that again help to highlight the existing qualities of the house and gardens to the greatest extent possible. And I think it was one of the peer reviewers' suggestions at one point to go a little bit more modern with the design of the house, again, so that it doesn't try to mimic the existing house too much and lets that kind of have its own emphasis within the site composition. So sorry, just to read back here. So this north elevation here is the elevation that would be visible from the direction of Delphi in Robin Street. So again, this has been shortened by 50 feet in this section here, and then steps down to 3 stories towards Meeting House Lane, which is in that direction. This view at the bottom is taken from the direction of Meeting House Lane and presents the short end of the north building from that direction. More elevations of the project here. So the north building south elevation, and this is cut through the existing or through the connecting piece to the existing mansion. Looking at the sort of inside of the north building, this kind of inside elevation of the north building. And we're using 2 tones within all of these elevations to create some segmentation and break up the massing so it doesn't appear as one long elevation, but as a series of these elevation kind of components, such as this piece here, which you can see incorporated into the roof as well. And this elevation from the west, which really shows the kind of front entry to the existing house, the front entry to the connecting piece here, which is largely glassy, again, to bridge those 2 different pieces of the buildings. And then the way that we're approaching the design for the west building with its additional story, we've incorporated this 1-story brick section at the base here, both to kind of emphasize this upper 4-story piece of it, which is most visible from Blue Hill Ave as the topography continues to rise in that direction, and also to tie in sort of the top and base into that similar vocabulary that's being used there. So we really want the top of this building to relate to the north building, and then both to contrast the existing house. And we have an accent material that we're using here that does start to play on the existing coloration of the house, just to tie them into that building. And one of the questions we had at a previous meeting was just about how do we deal with the different kind of roof geometries that we've created. And we've dealt with that by simplifying all of the aesthetic language, sharing it between the 2 structures that we're creating, and using the same essential system of how we dormer the roof on both buildings to what we think effectively mitigates that slight change in angle between the 2 roof pitches, and lets them share a same vocabulary with a slightly different aesthetic. These are the remaining elevations of the buildings here. So this is the elevation of the west building as it faces the historic garden here. So we're tying in that 1-story brick section here, an entirely different brick than is used on the house and on the gardens, but playing off of that existing garden wall, so that when you are between the 2 spaces, as you are here, you're kind of surrounded in that in masonry materials. This top view here is looking at the project from the south of the site. So again, you can see the existing house and the garden walls here, as well as this short end of the west building in front of you. And this section is the entry to the west building cut through the existing courtyard. Looking at where the building entry would be right here. And again, using the 2 different colors to segment those elevations and draw focus to the central piece here. And this is just an enlarged elevation view of a piece of that, just showing the essential material palette that we're using. And again, trying to keep it very neutral while having a small accent that plays off of the coloration of the existing house, while being an entirely different material and texture, so as not to riff on that too directly. So these are all fiber cement panel and clapboard essentially, and a brick veneer at the base with some cast stone detailing where it transitions to the clapboard material, as well as soldier courses and things like that to give the brick variety. But essentially all of these larger beige pieces would be a fiber cement panel. And these gray pieces would be a clapboard to give it more texture at those locations. And within these darker colored spaces here, we actually tighten up the grain of that clapboard material to again create some relief from that gray and to break up the building articulation at those moments. And this is a section cut through the west building, and this is really helpful for illustrating our strategy for helping to mitigate some of those mechanical units. And we're using this on both buildings. So on the north building, there's the exact same treatment of this top parapet edge. So what we're really doing is creating a small, for lack of a better term, a bathtub at the top of the building by raising that up about 1'9" at that point, so that the mechanical units are much more difficult to see from off the site. And again, in all of those context views and elevations, we've modeled those mechanical units within those views. And again, the units stack. There's a shared corridor wall system here, and the garage below the west building with the historic house beyond. These are typical unit plans of the project. So every unit we're planning on having a washer dryer. It's basically typical for all the units, a 1 bath, 1 bed, 1 bedroom unit, a 2 bath, 2 bedroom unit, and a 3 bed, 2 bath, 3 bedroom unit. And these are a series of slides showing the shadow impacts of the project on the existing context. So here you can, it may be a little difficult to make out, but you can see the gray here represents I'm sorry about that. The gray here represents the existing shadow impact of the site as it exists today, the existing building, garden walls, etc. And this purple color represents new shadow impact from the new construction. So this is in the spring equinox. We're showing this at 9 a.m., at noon, and at 6 p.m. And you can see because of the direction, see this compass here, north is essentially that direction. The sun is sort of moving in a pathway like that around the site. So the existing gardens are really only affected by shadows of the new construction in the late afternoons in any of the different time periods that we studied. So this is showing spring equinox, the summer solstice. So again, 9 a.m., 12 noon when the sun is almost directly overhead, 3 p.m. when it's coming mainly from the west, and then 6 p.m. just closer to sunset when it's starting to have some impact on the existing gardens. This is fall equinox. So again, 9 a.m., 12 noon, 3 p.m., and 6 p.m. when again it has the largest impact on the gardens at that time, and it's very close to sunset at that point of the year. In the winter solstice, when the sun angle is the lowest, the shadows are the longest, pretty much every time period that we study. Again, this is 9 a.m., noon, and 3 p.m. showing the shadow impacts on the project. And then a series of perspective images showing the project from the Blue Hill Ave entry. And again, we have modeled all of the mechanical equipment here, but because of that added parapet level, from this distance, you really don't see it in this perspective. Existing house here, the connecting piece, the north building here, and the west building with the additional floor that we've added over this revision. And this view shows the existing garden here. So this is looking sort of directly north in this elevated perspective. So again, this is the west building here with the sort of attic story that we've added to it. The north building beyond, with the cutback and the revised length of that building, which really minimizes its length in comparison to the existing historic building. And some of these new retaining walls that are starting to weave their way into the landscape and the layout of the site. So with that, I'll turn it over to Blair Hines to go through the landscape architecture of the project.
Thank you, Dan. Will you just continue to move the slides though, please?
Yep, absolutely.
All right, very good. So for the record, Blair Hines, Principal Landscape Architect at Verdant Landscape Architects. And most of these images that we'll go over, you've seen before. But just to reiterate the key points about the design concept. From the very beginning, we've been very concerned about Blue Hill Avenue and preserving the large mature trees there. And the plan preserves most of them, and in addition, adds additional plant materials there. Everyone's been very concerned about protecting the existing historic garden, and the plan preserves the garden, and it will be refurbished and repaired. Next, one of the things that, of course, we've heard a lot about concerns from the abutters is mitigating the impact. Dan, can you go back up, please? Is mitigating the impact of the project on the abutting residences. And as you can see, surrounding the site to the north, to the south, and to the east are very ample evergreen tree plantings all along the edge, again, to create a strong separation between the proposed development and the adjacent neighborhoods. And lastly, and we'll go into this more detail in some of the later slides, is supporting residential living. And one of the other important principles that we'll be using in terms of plant selection and other elements within the design will be sustainable design. Next slide, please, Dan. Next slide, please, Dan. Okay, this is a diagram I think that you all have seen again before, and it basically shows both vehicular circulation, which you'll see in the dots. And as Dad described, there's a two-way circulation in off of Blue Hill Avenue that goes to the entry circle for visitors, and it provides some parking that's to the sheep upper left. And then what you can see with the smaller dots and arrows are the various walkways that are being proposed, which includes a walkway to go out to Blue Hill Avenue for a bus stop for the children, and as well as walkways that connect various egresses from the building to the main gardens and primary outdoor use areas in terms of the garden and the playground and so forth. So there's a very robust series of pathways throughout the site. Next slide, please. So this I will go over very quickly. This, as you can see, has to do with the various types of plant materials that we're proposing. We're proposing 4 different evergreen trees, predominantly 3, the native white pine, but also Norway spruce and a western red cedar, which both of those trees grow very rapidly. And we wanted to emphasize plantings around the periphery of the site that are robust and grow quickly. In addition, around deciduous trees are being planted around the entry court and along the parking area to provide shade and again to provide strong fall colors. And then as you can see on the illustrative to the lower left-hand corner, we're also emphasizing plants that support pollinators in terms of flowers, as well as providing fruit and cover for birds so that this can be an area that will help support birds during migration as well as resident birds. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we spent a lot of time for, and I think that's going to be really quite charming, is that with the north building sliding down and being removed, we have a large area of garage area that's below grade, which now will become a landscape area. And here what we're thinking about doing is kind of reflecting on the kind of Shipman formal garden, but to do it in a much more simplified manner. And so there will be a series of hedging And then rather than in a very complex perennial garden, to have more of a garden that's based on ecological plantings of pollinators and so forth. Then the other thing that you can see in this new open space to the upper right is a large area of what we're calling synthetic turf. This would be an area for concentrated outdoor kind of relaxation. They could even hold, like spin classes or yoga classes in this area. But the idea is to create an area that residents can use intensively, and it would be at the entryway. The circular drop-off area is also being seen as a major amenity space for the development. Here we'd be using a series of different colored precast pavers, and bearing in mind all this material is over the garage below. And to us, that's really has created enormous opportunities to emphasize landscape over surface parking. And you can see that we're framing the entrance both to the west building and to the north building, and that the overall layout and alignment of the circular drop-off area is all based on emphasizing the entrance into the existing historic house. Next slide, please. Lastly, one of the concerns that peer review had to do with anticipating that there'll be a number of children here, and that the need for a play structure. And here, our approach is really to provide play structures that are appropriate to the youngest children, as well as play structures that are more for the elementary age kids. And the play areas will have adjacent benches and picnic tables and so forth. So it can be a place where families can gather as children play. And you can see that's outlined at the bottom, just off of the main terrace garden. So lastly, while this is up, what we've been trying to do is really create different intensive use areas for different populations of development. In order to preserve the garden needs to be, basically a passive area for visitation, not a place for intensive play. The major outdoor area for adult residents will really be around the existing manse building, which has a series of kind of glass rooms around it, and there's large extensive areas of patio there. I think that's most of the ZBA reviewers and neighbors have seen. There's a lot of area out there for recreation. And then again, iterating that to the right of the drop-off area is another area that we're proposing for adults and families to gather. I think that's all the slides, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions that anyone would have. Thank you very much.
Well, it's lovely.
This is just an additional slide here, just to add to that part of the presentation. This is our updated photometric study of the project. Really, the only difference in the photometrics from what we had presented previously was this area, the north building, where that has been removed. There's some site lighting there, but it's mostly not lit, so not contributing to additional lighting on site. And the additional area created by removing part of that garage has allowed us to slide things over so that there's no spillage at all onto any of the neighboring properties. And I think with that, we can go on to Jim Burke from DeSolbrick Sala with updated civil engineering.
Good evening, everyone. Jim Burke with the DeSolbrick Sala offices in Quincy, a registered professional engineer. Our civil drawings are kind of really kind of just correlated themselves with the architectural changes as well as the landscape changes. And actually almost every sheet was revised accordingly. Next sheet. The existing conditions plan that you're looking at right now, we've added a couple more trees to show some of the smaller varieties that are on the site, specifically up towards Blue Hill Avenue. You can see the group up in near the power lines. We added some coniferous trees. I can't tell you what specific type they were, but we worked with Blair to get those on the plan because they are going to be impacted by the walkway leading up from the proposed building to Blue Hill Ave. Next plan. You can actually see one of the additional trees shown on there that it's marked out with the red that's proposed to be removed. And that was about it as far as the additional removals for this particular revision. Next slide. This is the garage layout. We're showing 77 underground parking spaces. Again, correlated it with Embark's plans to make sure the building footprint was right. Revised setbacks to property lines, revised the zoning chart up in the upper left-hand corner to correlate with the revised design. I'd say that's about the changes on that particular plan. Next slide. And this is where you'll see the first floor, the ground floor coming into both buildings, and you'll see the revised cul-de-sac and the shortened up building. Additional dimensions provided, showing setbacks to property lines, distances between buildings, and the like. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. We're also, the number of parking spaces on the surface didn't change. I believe we had 53 before, and we still have 53. A grading plan. Only changes in the grading plan is specifically related to the entrance and the cul-de-sac. We made sure we had some positive grading away from the doorways. Handicap accessibility is achieved. And we made sure that the features that that Blair was designing to make this an inviting entrance were achievable in a civil perspective and in grading. Next slide. The drainage and utilities. I know this is a big item for everybody. No changes. The changes that we propose, a reduction in impervious and increasing pervious area, generated a benefit for the existing, the proposed system that was currently being reviewed by Mr. Reardon. We didn't propose any changes to that to allow this system to act a little bit more efficiently with these proposed changes. Sewer and water also remain unchanged, and so this plan really just the only revisions to it are reflective with regards to the new layout. And from a civil perspective, the rest of it's kind of details, construction details that also didn't change at this time. So if you have any questions, I can certainly go into the source study that was submitted recently. I think I don't know if Dan has that, if you want to have me share that screen, or if I can just go through the numbers and what that report says. I tried to reach out to Sean Reardon a couple times since the report was prepared. Have not heard back from him, but it's that kind of season. Everyone's busy. So, but the result is that we had the advantage of having a 2-inch rainfall. I think on August 22nd, there's a rain gauge in Cleary Square. Boston Water and Sewer has them all over the city. There's another one in Mattapan, and on August 23rd, there was a good 2-inch rainfall, which shows significant spike in all legs of that lead to the sewer manhole down at the intersection of down the end of Meeting House Lane. That being said, I took a look at some of those flows, the high flows that had the infiltration within it. Analyzed the capacity, the flow depth of that line. I think it was 296 gallons per minute. That depth correlated to 2.85 inches of sewer. In top of that, our proposal generates 15,760 gallons per day. Now, when you calculate, you design a sewer for that value, you'll multiply it by 5 times for the peak flow. So that now you're looking at 5 times that flow to make sure that, when everybody's in, taking a shower and it's the majority of people are getting ready for work and everyone's using the water supply and sending it down the sewer. So you use that flow and add that to that infiltration flow. We end up with an additional 1/4 inch depth, bringing it up to 3.3 inches of flow depth within the sewer line. So even with the infiltration that's occurring throughout this neighborhood, this additional flow of 15,000 gallons per day generates an additional 1/4 inch flow depth. And one thing to keep in mind too is that I think a lot of the infiltration coming in from the Meeting House Lane leg, I think it's coming a lot from the site from Delphi Academy, as well as our site. I've actually seen pop the manhole at the top of Meeting House Lane with flow. And if you look at the report as well, it actually has flow rates of 13 gallons per minute. That's the low rate, the minimum flow, and that occurred at 2:45 a.m. in the morning. There's nobody up using in that small neighborhood using that sewer. That's all infiltration. That's 19,000 gallons a day. We're proposing 15,000 gallons a day. We replace our service. We replace half a Delphi Academy service in this particular project. That's going to reduce that infiltration significantly. You could make the assumption that it's a wash or maybe 50% reduction, but in the end, there is capacity in the sewer. And with the construction of the new service for this particular site and the replacement of Delphi Academy's 50% of their service, the infiltration for Meeting House Lane will also be reduced. Report is on file. Actually, I'm going to be swapping that particular one out. There were some numbers as I was reviewing them. I talked to EST. They had a different number of days on the Barbara Lane analysis, and because they all went in one manhole, these meters, and they put them in the same day and they took them out the same day. There was a negative flow, and I just asked them to take a look at the numbers, and I got that report back, and I'm going to be resubmitting that for review later. It didn't change much. It just, changed a little bit of the averages, but the highs and the lows would remain the same. But if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
So, Mr. Chair, I believe that's all the new information from us tonight. I know that's obviously quite a bit of information that we've thrown your way. So perhaps it makes sense to pause now for questions on any of the topics that we've gone through tonight.
Questions from the members?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. O'Brien.
Thank you. First of all, my compliments to the design team, the landscape team, etc. It's a lovely design. The big question is whether it belongs here or not. But having said that, visually, and that is always a matter of opinion and a matter of taste, yeah, it looks lovely. So thank you, and thank you for your efforts. Mr. Burke, with all due respect to you and to civil engineers everywhere, I'm a simple legislative lobbyist. I got to tell you, every time you open your mouth and you start talking about some of these reports, I get buried in a heap of gobbledygook. So is this gonna work or not?
Yes.
All right, tell me why it's gonna work and do it in plain English so somebody who's not an engineer can understand.
Which, are you talking about the sewer? You're talking about the stormwater that you had concerns with earlier?
Take your pick.
Well, stormwater is going to be retained on site and released in a controlled fashion from the site to the same locations that it's currently flowing to. So as we detain that stormwater flow, we'll release it in a fashion that is reduced and not to flood out the down gradient members. So we're keeping the majority of the stormwater on our property, not to exacerbate the existing infrastructure.
We seem to be getting some interference from maybe our tech person. Okay, sorry, Mr. Burke.
That's okay.
All right, so most of the stormwater is going to be retained on site and will be released slowly so as to not to exacerbate the existing flows through the system. Is my layman's explanation correct?
That's accurate, yes.
Okay. Now the sewage, you popped the manhole, you stuck a camera, had some flow meters. We had that big rainstorm and what I basically heard you say is that by replacing half the stuff from Delphi and in this project, it's going to reduce the infiltration and basically at the end of the day, there'll be enough capacity within the existing lines to handle the sewage flow at peak numbers?
Almost. The existing sewage infrastructure, even if we didn't replace these sewers, and this is the sewer services, there's enough capacity in that line to handle the additional 15,000 gallons per day as proposed, even with the infiltration occurring today. The last statement I made is a kind of a bonus, if you will, with the replacement of the infrastructure that is allowing this infiltration and extra flow during storm events to occur. That is now going to be replaced, made watertight, and only contain sewage as opposed to underground stormwater through the line, thereby allowing additional capacity for sewer.
So in other words, it's not going to back up. We're not going to have overflow in the streets or anything like that.
No, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. DeSalle. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Burke, by the way.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Ms. Joffer?
So I recall that one concern at either the last hearing or the one just before that, I think it was Mr. Bomers who said that the view of the building from Blue Hill Ave was, I guess, a significant concern given the increased height. And so, Mr. Riggs, you may have already shown this vantage point to us, and if you did, I apologize, but what does the building look like from Blue Hill Ave, if you have that available?
Yeah, if you don't mind, thank you, Ms. Joffrey. I can show that perspective with you.
Thank you.
Give me one moment to locate this. Sorry. Okay, so this is a perspective. Just give me 1 second to. There we go. So this is a perspective of the project from the south end of Blue Hill Ave. And this is a view we had shown previously with the the previous design, showing the west building here with the additional attic story that we've added to it here. And again, you can really see how the effect of that grade coming up towards Bose Hill helps to mitigate that additional story. So I understand that the fence is blocking the lower section of this as well, but that kind of lower level that we've treated in brick really is pretty difficult to distinguish from this vantage point. And for the most part, it really presents itself as a 4-story building from Blue Hill Avenue. So we did include this view, and we had one from, just give me 1 second to flip to it. It doesn't show Blue Hill Avenue, but it does show the existing, or the site entry rather. So just give me 1 moment and I can locate that as well. So that was this view here. So again, this is, you'd have to zoom out a little bit to get the idea from Blue Hill Ave, but this would be our site entry from Blue Hill Avenue. So probably about 20 feet into the site, and the west building here with the additional height, and the north building here kind of starting to recede into the distance a bit.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also have in my notes some concerns about retaining walls, and I know you mentioned those during your presentation. Can you talk a little bit about whether, why, right? Because you're going to say they're sufficient, like why they're sufficient in this instance.
Sorry, sufficient in what manner?
Well, I think I was just looking back at my notes and we had a couple of people who thought that I guess either soil runoff might be an issue and that having a retaining wall and even, I hope I'm remembering this correctly, a guardrail might be necessary.
Okay, let me bring up the site layout, and perhaps Mr. Burke, you can jump in if I miss anything. But let me just share my screen again. So I'm just going to zoom in on this a bit. But Jim and I actually spoke briefly about this today. So within the site, there's a sort of several different I'll call them types of retaining walls in terms of how tall they are and what they're holding back. So from this vantage point here, these taller ones could be constructed of a number of different sources, but Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, there isn't any walking surface here.
No, there will be a guardrail. There is a guardrail required
Okay.
for along there, probably from that double catch basin down the bottom all the way up to, probably the catch basin right at the entrance. You're looking at a retaining wall at that catch basin. You're looking at maybe that's about 4 feet tall right there. Now, as you come down towards the detention basin and you're swinging around, that's where it ends up being like about 12 feet. And then it reduces in height quickly. And then once you get past the catch basin, it's only like 1 or 2 feet. And the guardrail wouldn't necessarily be required there, but you probably just continue it along anyway and give it a feature that would carry through the roadway. The only other place would be up at the entrance where the retaining wall is about 4 feet in height. And you'd put a guardrail along that edge as well.
Okay, so I just refreshed my recollection with my notes, and it was Miss Cheryl Tagayas who said, given that there'll be a lot of removal and addition of earth, her concern was that neighboring abutters might actually sort of experience sort of new earth movement. And so are these, the guardrails and retaining walls that you're mentioning now, are these new additions since June? They are.
I guess
Sorry.
you'd end up with a timber style guardrail. That'd be for vehicles too. I think it's 32 inches minimum height, if I'm not mistaken. Now, if there's a walkway along there, that has to bring up to, I think it's 42 inches to prevent anyone from falling over there. But
Okay,
Right, and just if I might just step in there, the only new retaining walls are at the front of the site where the north building was pared back. That's additional retaining walls because of the change in grade there, and to make sure that those landscaped and amenity areas are safe and at level grade and accessible from the entry drive. But the rear retaining walls are the same as before. The retaining walls along the side of the site are the same as before. And then just in regards to the amount of, fill and earthworks going on at site, those have remained relatively the same. However, in the rear of the site, I wouldn't say that there's concern of, soil erosion going on to neighbors. The amount of fill being brought to the rear of the site is relatively minor. It's being cut, the grade is being cut as we go up that slope, and then the retaining wall holds in place the fill that's brought in to make the the driveway area level. So that's supported by a retaining wall in the bottom right corner of the site plan. And then on the left side of the site plan, it's a very, very gradual slope that can be graded out, mimicking kind of the existing grades.
thank you for that.
And just to piggyback on that comment a bit, we'd be doing a decent amount of excavation at the garage level here too. So I'm sure we could repurpose as much of that soil as we possibly can in any of those new fill areas.
Okay, thank you. Where do things stand with respect to the school bus stop?
The school bus stop is, I'm sorry, can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, okay, sorry. The school bus stop is where you see that slight little kink in the wall. And that's the current location, and we presume that will be the location at the end, but there'll be certainly some review by the school department about where they want to put the bus stop, and we'll be responsive to make sure it works.
Thank you. I do now see it labeled there. And finally, that we also requested, I believe this was on your plate and not ours, that you connect with the Department of Health on the size of the trash room. Has there been progress on that point?
So Joe or Jesse, I don't know if you have more information about that. I know Tim Zerwisky, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. I know he had reached out to a number of folks, and we had had a little bit more conversation about that. Joe, I don't know if you have more info.
Right, I'm not sure if Jesse or Tim would have more information, but that would be the last I've heard.
I would say that's an outstanding item and that remains on our to-do list. So we'll look into that after this meeting.
I believe the town health department said that there wasn't a standard, and they recommended that that the applicant be required to adhere to standard practices with respect to the size of the trash room, something to that effect.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I have, and I believe I might have sent it to you, but maybe not to Bev, and then onward to the rest of the board.
Yeah.
I do have some correspondence from Carolyn Kinsella, who's the Director of Health for the town. The chair's characterization is largely accurate. I would have to go back and see exactly what Ms. Kinsella said, but I think the pressing question was, is there a standard in public health for sizing these trash rooms? And there's not. It's more about, what are the effects of an undersized trash room in terms of rodents and pests and other things. And so that's kind of the indirect way of how these things are regulated.
Right.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for your responses. Thank you for your progress over the end of the summer, which I know is busy for everyone, both professionally and personally. And I'll just say, for the benefit of the chair, that I look forward to the peer review, because every time things change, I think I can benefit from some expert advice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the only question I have is, I was focused on the elevation from Blue Hill Avenue as well. Is the applicant representing to the board that none of the mechanicals that are on the roof will be visible from any public way?
That's our view of the design. Yes. Yeah, that's our intention.
Could you, I don't think you have it, but I think it would be helpful. And one of the reasons why the perspective from Blue Hill Avenue was important was to see the massing from Blue Hill Avenue, from the sidewalk or the travel lane on Blue Hill Avenue before the roof was raised to accommodate the smaller north building. Is there a way that you can compare a side-by-side comparison of that showing the same perspective? It was all, to me, that question was really driven by massing and height, not so much by its appearance.
If you give me a couple moments, I can try to pull up one of the previous presentations and put that together quickly.
I don't know that I need it tonight. I mean, I think if you could just get that to us, that would be fine. I mean, you know, I want to leave time for questions, and I have a question for Mr. Schumer. But that's the extent of my questions on the presentation. Mr. Schumer, are we going to see the turning movements for the fire department?
Certainly. We can turn things over now to Bob Michaud of MDM Transportation to go over that.
How long is that going to take?
Less than 2 minutes.
Okay. The reason I say that is, like Ms. Joffer, I want the experts to look at it, and we really need the opinion of the fire department. But if it's a 2-minute presentation, I think it'd be worth our while, recognizing that we need the fire department to hear this, to see it, or to be able to review it and then to comment on it. Go ahead,
Sure.
Mr. Michaud.
Thank you, Bob Michaud, MDM Transportation Consultants. I'm going to do a share screen and show you the same information that we've shared with the chief, which is an auto turn analysis. It's essentially showing the swept paths of various vehicle types within the context of the current site plan layout, starting with the largest potential responding vehicle, which is the Milton Ladder 1 vehicle. This is a vehicle that would not ordinarily respond initially to the site, but nonetheless can accommodate that type of vehicle. And what's shown here is a left turn maneuver into the property and then around the property in a clockwise way, right turn out back to Blue Hill Avenue. Shows ample maneuvering area. The second iteration of this shows a right turning vehicle into the property and continuing to sweep toward the circular driveway element at the building front, and then reversing direction in a T movement, which is typical of apartment complexes like this, to reverse direction and leave as a right turn from the property. So again, ample maneuvering area. With respect to delivery vehicles, we show a box truck type design pulling into the service area, if you will, the loading area adjacent to the main buildings, still within the vicinity of the so-called two-way section of the driveway, but then continuing along the one-way circulation loop, leaving. And finally, an ambulance vehicle, which would most likely have direct access to the building fronts and entry points at the circular driveway, where it would be able to circumnavigate that element and leave directly to Blue Hill Avenue, or at its election to continue around the site to the more southerly driveway. We've also looked at, although this is not a typical condition necessarily, hopefully you can, what you should see on your screen is the same Ladder 1 vehicle that we did in the first design iteration, also being able to circumnavigate entirely that circular driveway element at the building front. That is not likely to be something that the fire department wants to do as a preferred movement, but if they really needed to or wanted to, they could still maneuver around that circular element. as an option. We understood from the chief, the primary concern that he had was having a larger responding vehicle blocking circulation within the property. He was not aware in his initial review of the plans that there was this delivery drop-off area near the front portion of the site. That area, while it's designated for loading activity, would serve as the most likely parked position of a responding vehicle. To the extent access to the building itself was necessary by that larger vehicle, the prior maneuvers that I had indicated would allow that type of a movement to occur. So on August 27th, when we presented this information to the chief, he now has a firm understanding of the ability for the site to accommodate these various maneuvers, and appeared in that conversation to be satisfied with the design and meeting his requirements for access and circulation. But we're certainly welcoming any input either from the chief or from the peer reviewer on that matter. And that's 2 minutes. Thank you.
It seems, I don't know if someone was talking, but it seems like they were on mute.
Was there an issue with respect to did the fire department raise an issue with respect to the available space to fight a fire in the back?
No, they did not.
Mr. Zawinski, can you would you mind following up and asking for a report from the fire department to be available to the board at the next meeting?
Will do.
Thank you. Any further questions from the board members or anything else, Mr. Schomer, for the board tonight?
No, Mr. Chair, that's it from us for tonight.
Members?
Nothing further from me, Mr. Chairman.
Normie,
Mr. Hill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Please.
Just going back to the auto turn analysis, I just had a question on the ladder truck turning movement and what appears to be a pinch point in the southeast corner of the driveway. And I think we just need some help interpreting these lines. There's several colored lines, which.
Can we put that up? Can we put that up so that we can follow Mr. Hill's testimony?
Yeah, if you could go back to the first sheet, Bob.
The first sheet. Okay, hang on just a second. Okay, exhibit 1.
If you could zoom into the lower right-hand corner of the driveway.
Yes.
I mean, it looks like that blue line is encroaching on what is either a curb or a wall. Can you maybe explain what that line represents, and is that an obstruction?
Sure. It represents the front bumper overhang of the vehicle, which is elevated above the surface of the roadway by what I believe to be several feet. On visual inspection approaches, but does not go over the curbed portion of the driveway. What's shown in green, the green lines that are more central to that black arrow, is the actual wheel track of the vehicle. So the envelope, if you will, the full extent of the colored section in this diagram represents all of the potentially swept areas, including the right rear and front left bumper portions of the vehicle, none of which encroach on any of the curbed areas of the site.
But would you agree with me, though, that blue line in that location does encroach on the curb? And you're saying that's the bumper, but I'm just concerned that's really tight right there. I'm wondering if that's going to be a problem with a driver of the fire truck navigating that corner.
Well, it doesn't extend beyond that curbed portion. So if I really zoom in quite a bit more here, you'll see that there's this angle point right here where the bumper approaches, but does not extend beyond that curbed portion, which is the double black line. And you'll see that the blue line continues to approach, but does not extend beyond that double line, which again is the curb. So there's no encroachment of even the bumper over the curb. So that does not present an impact or an encroachment that we're concerned with.
Okay. As a layperson, Mr. Chairman, this strikes me as extremely tight and leaving no margin for error for a first responder to make that corner in an emergency. This seems to be unreasonable in my layperson's view, but I'd like to hear what the chief says.
Noted. Noted.
With respect to the photometrics plan, I looked at that briefly this afternoon, and it does appear that there's light trespass on abutting property. Is that true?
Mr. Riggs. Light spillage.
Oh, sorry, let me present the photometric study again. So if you don't mind just repeating the last portion of your question, Mr. Hill. I'm sorry, I'm just
Well, I just wanted to ask you to confirm that there is in fact some light spillage on abutting properties here, and I think isn't the objective with any project to avoid that?
The objective is to avoid that. Yeah. So the 0.1 here just represents. And I apologize if I misspoke earlier. The 0.1 represents a very minor encroachment on the Delphi Academy here in this location. So you are correct. There's a tiny bit of light spillage there at that specific location.
Okay.
Yeah, the remainder of the site is free of that though. However, so apologize if I misrepresented that earlier.
And if I may, while we're on this plan, could you maybe just explain what those numbers mean and what that 0.1 is measuring?
Sure. 1 second, let me move in. Let me just share that again. So these numbers are essentially foot candles that are visible. I'm not an expert on this, so I apologize if I misspeak, but I can absolutely give you a more clear definition of what exactly that represents at our next hearing. But essentially those are foot candles of light for that area that would be represented there. So it would be a very small amount of ground directed light that may spill over that part of the site. Again, we're planting all along this edge here, so in reality that would probably be greatly minimized. But when they're doing these calculations, they don't really plan for the planting as part of that calculation. So apologies if that's not a clear enough answer. I can absolutely prepare a better answer for our next hearing.
Just to supplement that, Mr. Chair, through the chair to Attorney Hill, a foot candle is the measurement of light equal to 1 candle at a distance of 1 foot. So a tenth of a foot candle is a de minimis light impact. It's barely measurable at that distance.
My final question, Mr. Chairman, was on the sewer report, and I must say I kind of agree with Mr. O'Brien. I mean, this was very hard to read as an attorney, at least. I mean, I feel like I should be able to understand some of the stuff, and there was just no summary, no discussion, it's just data put on a sheet, and I have had a hard time following it. But what I can't understand is how there are certain examples of flow going towards the manhole at rates that are exceeding the flow that's going downstream, and that just logically doesn't make sense to me. So for example, I'll just take one data point and then maybe Mr. Burke can explain it to me. on the section of the pipe that's labeled US2, on August 19th, there was a maximum flow of 296 gallons per minute at 11 o'clock in the morning. That's on August 19th. And that's in the US2 section. So that's an upstream section that's going into the manhole. And then going out of the manhole downstream, the maximum rate of flow on that same day was 146 gallons per minute. So what I don't understand is wouldn't the maximum flow rate on August 19th be at least the maximum flow rate of the section of the pipe that's going into it?
Yes, and I agree with you. The numbers themselves, in a lot of cases, fail to make sense with regards to mathematics. In a sense, when you think you're adding two up gradient legs and you've got one down gradient leg, you'd think they would add up. I actually, like I said earlier, I asked these guys to take a look at these numbers and provide explanations to the negative numbers and some of the zero rates that have occurred even with inflows on that same day. And the answers I got is that there is debris and sludge, and every now and then they'll make the reading and they'll record it. So it's data that is subjective from a standpoint of a large amount of the data, and you take the average thereof. What you'll see if you look at the graphs, you'll see the spikes, like you said, on that 296 that occurs around those storm events. That particular one, I think someone has a sump pump tied into Barbara Lane, to tell you the truth, because there were a couple of slugs like that that are connected to an inflow resurgence, and that's hard to regulate and determine where it's coming from. But what the numbers do throw, if you look at the graphs, you can see when there isn't a rainfall event, you'll see the nominal flow. You can actually draw a straight line using the graphs, and that gives you a good indication of what is actually flowing in that particular pipe on a normal particular day. As far as the highs and lows go, those are the numbers that I use to calculate the capacity of the sewer. And just to see if, on a 2-inch rainfall with our building being added to it, can the pipe handle it? And, my calculations show that it can. As far as, the 296 and it not adding up, I think a lot of times, so you'll have the Meeting House Lane sewer has a greater capacity because of its pitch, in a sense that the last leg on Meeting House Lane is at a 4.6% pitch. The Barbara Lane sewer is flatter than that. That's at 1%. So the flow velocity coming down Meeting House Lane even will regulate higher, so it'll come in faster into that manhole and show a greater flow. The flow coming through Barbara Lane it comes in at a lower rate, and the inertia of the Meeting House Lane sewer will kind of cut that flow off and head into the MWRA sewer a little bit quicker. So the math doesn't always work, but you'll see that the averages for the outfall are greater, and the averages tend to work out.
So, Mr. Chairman, I mean, the US2 section is actually the Barbara Lane section, so that was the 296. So that wasn't the Meeting House Lane, and I think we remain very concerned that Mr. Burke's calculations are relying on the accuracy of the data, and I continue to have some serious concerns about the accuracy of the data that's been presented throughout this hearing. This data itself, doesn't seem credible. And of course, we had real problems with the drainage, offsite drainage report data. So on behalf of the neighbors, particularly Meeting House Lane, we remain very concerned about the capacity of both the stormwater system and the sewer system. You can see the pictures that were provided in that report showing that those sewer pipes are already half full, and what appears to be groundwater, because it's clear as crystal clear. You don't see the sludge, you don't see the waste, you see clear water. So that indicates there's a lot of infiltration going on. So I think there's still a capacity issue here. We'll be interested in hearing what Mr. Reardon has to say about this data.
Yeah.
If I can just clarify one thing, the maximum flow rate from Meeting House Lane, I used the Meeting House Lane values, not the Barber Lane. You picked the 296, but the analysis I used the high for Meeting House Lane.
Noted. No, and Mr. Hill noted, we too would be looking forward to hearing from Mr. Reardon. I think, Mr. Zawinski, if you could also make a note to make sure that Mr. Berkeley has a chance to review that. I'm sure that he will also want to hear from Mr. Reardon. But particularly in light of the conflicting I don't want to say conflicting, the conversation about the data that we just heard, I'd appreciate hearing from Mr. Berkeley on that point.
If I can make one other point.
Mr. Burke.
Discussions with Mr. Reardon on this particular study, he asked for just the numbers, didn't ask for a report. He specifically asked just for the numbers, and that's what we gave him.
Okay, we'll hear from him. Okay, anything, and thank you, Mr. Burke and Mr. Hill. Mr. Hill, is there anything else?
No, thank you.
Let me ask if there's questions from the audience on anything we've heard tonight.
We have one from the McGraths.
Mr. McGrath.
Mrs.
Hi, it's Amy McGrath.
Mrs. McGrath, welcome
Good
back.
evening. Thank you. I wanted to ask a question about the lighting plan that was presented. I didn't realize, I'm looking at that. I see that light spillage is not just over onto Delphi, but actually completely over the house to I think that's Barber Lane over there. There's 2 homes there. And then one of the houses on Meeting House Lane. But the question that I have is, does that measure the light impact when people are actually living here and they, it's the evening hours and they have their, lights on because they're living their life? What about, what about the lighting impact from that? Is that measured by that plan that you showed?
Mr. Riggs.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll just share that image again. The light impact of various windows and how they're lit isn't taken into account in these types of studies. This study takes into account all building mounted lighting, emergency lighting, signage lighting, site lighting. So that's all of the bollards, every piece of lighting that's used to light the driveways, the parking spaces, etc. So those window lights aren't taken into account. And just to zoom in more closely on the southern property line here, you can see that these numbers here are 0.0 at this point here. There might be a 0.1, which again, as Jesse had mentioned, is an incredibly
I see. Okay. Yeah, I gotcha.
amount of light. And on the Meeting House Lane side, it again is also 0.0 all along that property line.
Gotcha. That's the property line there. Okay. Okay.
Yep,
So,
exactly. Yeah, that solid line.
So the question I have is, the light impacts from windows will be, far. I mean, and just, when you look out your window and you see your neighbor's lights or whatever, and especially, remind me again, Mr. Riggs, about the length of the north building that faces Robin Street.
Sure. Let me just pull up a plan that shows that. Give me one moment. So the length of that building along Robin Street, it's 178 feet and 5 inches.
So how many?
Pole,
So be 4 stories, and then how many windows would be along the, that span right there?
So, this span here would only incorporate 2 of the residential stories. At the 4-story portion, sorry, let me skip around a little bit. It's 145-foot length. I'd have to go back to the elevation and count those windows. Give me one moment. I can bring that elevation up. Okay, sorry. Here's that the elevation that faces Robin Street again. So this is that portion of the north building. So you can see the general amount of windows on that facade.
Right. And then you get the other side of whatever that other, what you call the other building. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, the west building, which is in the distance
right
from that.
And
yeah.
then from Blue Hill Ave, and then the neighbors, who are across from Blue Hill Ave, they're going to get the full length of the west building, which is now 5 stories. So is there, I would assume this is something that's an issue in all developments, is there a study that one does to show the impact of lighting during evening hours on abutters?
In terms of the window lighting, there really isn't a study beyond, I'd say, a nighttime rendering or something like that, but that's all sort of speculative. I can say that we've, with our landscaping design and the way that we're intending on saving as many trees as possible. Sorry to keep zooming in and out of these windows, but part of the intention of these coniferous trees here is that they would be shaded all year round and help to account for blocking some of those views into people's windows. And the people who are living here also don't want people looking necessarily into their windows all the time as well either. So it's part of our kind of buffering.
We definitely won't be able to see them. They won't be able to see us. It's the light that is, I'm not going to see a person, but when you're, just to go, because since you mentioned the landscaping, that's actually where I was going to go next. I know that the consultant, I'm sorry, I forget his name, but he talked about ample evergreen plantings. And I know you shaded them in here so that we can't see them, but on the other property plan that you had that showed it had the slim line hugging the property line, the one line of evergreens, just a simple line. And so that's the area, and that's to buffer, the entrance and exit to the garage, the trash, the loading, and then the entire building as it faces this whole community over here. And I think the reason that you don't have plantings like you do on Blue Hill Ave, for example, is because this development is built out to the property line. But to me, this is totally inadequate to put a slim line of evergreen trees of a height, which I assume they're not 50 feet tall or 60 feet tall, however tall that building is. So it just seems bizarre to me. You have the same situation on the other side of the property. Again, you've built out to the property line. So you have no area, to adequately screen. Frankly, I don't think there's adequate screening that can even be done on this property on the Meeting House Lane side, given the fact that it's raised up, whatever many feet looming over the development, over the residents. The other thing is, a lot of times you've shown like pictures of trees, like there was, one picture from, I think it was from Robin Street of, existing trees, but, which you'll see there, those trees drop their leaves. So in the fall and through, early spring, whenever the leaves come back, you just see the carriage house there, which is, fine, obviously, but that's going to be just one slim line of evergreen trees of whatever height. So we're not really going to be blocked there. And again, I don't even think it's possible. The other thing that I just want to say, and just bear with me for 1 minute, if you will. I know, like in the last meeting that we had, and I've really been thinking about Ms. Barrett's comment, where, you know, she interjected, you know, that what has sort of been lost in this is the need for affordable housing, and that this is 40B. And I just want to be clear from the neighborhood's perspective and from our perspective, you know, personally, no one has ever said that, you know, affordable units were a problem here. I mean, the current proposal gives the town, I think my math is right, and someone can correct me, about 21 affordable units in reality for actual people who, you know, who need them. And, you know, obviously we have to weigh the need for affordable housing versus local needs under the statute, but, you know, approving a project with this level of intensity, you know, maybe will give the town, I don't know, you know, 5 more units, but it will completely alter the community that it's in which it's located. You know, and I even went on to the DHCD website because I wanted to check myself, like, am I being, you know, too difficult? Went onto the DHCD website, looked at similar towns, Winchester, Andover, Westwood, Cohasset, and none of those projects are like this. They are adequately screened. Even if you look at the most recent update to the Can't Nav project, they are moving in the direction of reasonable screening there. And anyways, you get my point. Thank you for bearing with me.
Thank you, Ms. Barrett. Miss McGrath, thank you very much. Let me, is there anybody else who wants to be heard tonight on what we've heard?
Mr. McGrath would like to be heard.
Mr. McGrath.
Could the traffic engineer please pull up the computer model of for the fire engine to get to the rear, to the north corner? I've got a couple of questions.
Okay, you should be able to see that.
If you could scroll it so I could get to the bottom corner.
This corner?
Yes, thank you. So my question kind of aligns with Mr. Hill. So this is all computer generated. My question is there a code of the dimensions for the fire truck to take this corner? At one point, it was 19 feet when you looked at a parking plan. And then at another point, it was 20 feet. So my question is, it's computer generated. Do we really believe the measurements? Is there a code for a fire truck for those dimensions to make that corner?
NFPA 1 cites a 20-foot dimension on all circulating aisles, which we're providing. The computer model is based on the actual vehicle that's used in Milton, the largest responding vehicle, which I'll show you a picture of. It's about a 41-foot dimension. It has a 19-foot axle to axle dimension. It has certain steering angles and lock angles associated with it, all of which are input into an industry standard model that is regularly used throughout the country to model these types of vehicles. And it's run, and it shows the swept path of a vehicle that's traveling at 15 miles an hour along its designated path. And in our experience, and we do this quite regularly, this represents a worst case scenario that is oftentimes, overstating the swept path of the actual vehicle. So within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, this model is used regularly to test whether or not the dimensions of a site are adequate to accommodate specific vehicle types. And those specific vehicle types vary from town to town, depending on which equipment is actually in use in that particular town. So that's why we get the actual vehicle dimensions directly from the fire department to do the modeling. So this is compliant with NFPA 1, it provides the adequate dimensions. It's in fact already been peer reviewed. That aspect of the site, that particular corner of the site, I don't believe has changed materially from where we did the original modeling that was peer reviewed by Vanass and Associates. So there's nothing here that's posing as problematic.
So how about a trash truck? It hooks a 90 at the corner and then it queues up right at that entrance and just stays right there for, what, once, twice, 3 times a week to pick up 90, 180 barrels of trash and recycling? Could you comment on that?
I don't have what the trash loads are for this particular facility, nor do I know whether or not that vehicle will be coming daily, every few days, or weekly. I can say that the management of that particular vehicle within the property would be such that it would not need to be in a park position very long at all. But that's a matter of management.
Yeah, management. That's what I was getting at with the my homework that wasn't accomplished, and I've been quiet for a couple of meetings now. When they originally showed the trash area in the garage, I believe it was 150 feet. And then all of a sudden it came back at being 300 and change. And Mr. Schumer said they would have 90 barrels there. It's on record, maybe the 24th meeting. So if you have 90 barrels for trash, 90 barrels for recycling, that's 180 barrels of trash. So within that 180 barrels, they have to take them from that space, meander down with a so-called electric cart to get them to the doors, to the trash truck that's queuing up in dimensions that I truly, coming from Mr. Burke or Sala, I don't believe these dimensions are accurate. They are so close that I think they have to be that close because I don't think they work. You're 12 feet from a retaining pond that has a fire truck and the weight of these trucks, and you just think they're going to put up a guardrail? They're not going to do piles there. I know I'm going off on another tangent, but Tim, why don't we look into the trash truck queuing up along with obviously the fire chief? Sorry, and thank you very much.
Welcome. Does anybody else have a question? Okay, there's no further questions. Let me
Hello.
ask you.
Hello. Sorry, I didn't know I was being welcome to speak. I'm at 152 Robbins. Chris Paratos.
Yes, welcome back.
Thank you. Just a question on that retaining pond.
Yeah.
For Mr. Burke. What's the capacity of it?
If it's tens of thousands of gallons, if you give me a bit, I can get it for you.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that it's going to get overwhelmed at some point, and so that should be some math going into what kind of rainstorm it's going to take to overwhelm it. Obviously, it's meant to retain. It's a buffer, so it's going to only going to be able to hold that buffer for so long, and we've got quite a bit of rain recently, so just curious to see when that's going to overflow.
Yes, in the volume itself is designed to handle the 100-year event and meet those design standards. It will be, and it's been continued to be reviewed by the town's peer reviewer. But like I said, it's only half the site. You also have underground detention for the other half of the site. So if you kind of look at that detention pond, you probably have twice as much storage as you think. And one of them is underground for detention as well. But it's a significant volume for detention.
Could you find out what the capacity is for us?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prados. Ms. Barrett.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was on mute and taking notes, and I failed to call Mr. Paratus. There is no one else.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Barrett, can you make sure that Mr. Reardon speaks to the question from Mr. Parados? as well as the off-site float study that
Yes.
there's been questions on when we next meet.
So they will have this video. They will see this video. And I always meet with them before these meetings, so I'll make sure. I'll do my best to make sure that they have what they need to review to respond to your questions at your next meeting.
I think the question is, what's the expectation on the capacity of the ponding area and when it would be expected to overflow reasonably? I mean, I know we've heard a lot about 100-year events and some testimony that we have several 100-year events every year now. So I think that's the genesis of the concern.
Yes, understood.
I just asked them how big the.
Yeah, okay. This is what questions from the members before we wrap the hearing up?
There are no more. Oh, I'm sorry.
Members,
Thank you. Yep.
okay. So what I'm hearing for next meeting, the next meeting of the board will be, help me out on what the day is. Is it the 17th, maybe?
Let me open my calendar.
22nd, I believe it is, Mr.
It's in the
Chair.
calendar. It's in the
Yes, it's the 22nd.
22nd.
22nd. So at the 22nd, we're going to hear testimony from the peer reviewers on the
Yeah.
final submittal from the applicants, in particular, Mr. Bulmer and Mr. Reardon. And at that point,
Yes.
we'll also expect to hear something, a statement. If Mr. Berkeley's available to join us, that's great. If not, it would be good to have a statement from him as to the drainage and sewerage issues about which we've heard, so that we can conclude that piece of it. And also a feedback from the fire department on Mr. Michaud's traffic and turning models. There's another question about light spillage, and I think it would help to hear some more details. Mr. Riggs offered that you would provide some additional detail, and then I think Mr. Bulmer should also advise the board as to the extent of light spillage. Now, I understand what Mr. Schomer said about its intensity, but let's hear from Mr. Bulmer on that. According to my notes, I think that's all of the, and perhaps there'll be some comment about the trash truck and its ability to get around the corner in response to Mr. McGrath's point. But according to my notes, I think we've heard, I think that's all of the homework. Could be wrong. But the next hearing will be focused on that, and I'd like to hear from Ms. Barrett and on the conditions that are being recommended here, so that 2 weeks from the following week, we can begin to address that, just in terms of expectations. Is there any other business in front of the Board of Appeals tonight, September 13th?
From us, thank you very much.
Okay, board will stand in recess until the 22nd of September. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you.
Thank you.